Greetings and salutations. Welcome to a video about audio. This video has been a year in the making. We're going to talk about all of the cool budget phono cartridges that I have played with in 2018. I will give you my impressions of each one, and then at the end of the video I am going to tell you which one it was that I thought was the best bang for the buck. This video is going to be packed with information. Before we get into it, I want to give you a little bit of background. I want to talk about some of the basics of cartridge construction and setup. And the background is for those of you who are used to seeing videos from me on this channel that talk about computers and the Linux operating system, and you're wondering why I am posting this. Well, I have this disease. It's called audiophilia. That makes me an audiophile. That is somebody who is fascinated with recorded sound. And this has been going on for my entire life. Here's a picture of me 30 years ago. It was shortly before this picture was taken that I realized that that thing on the end of the tone arm there, you could buy a different one, and if you did that, you got a completely different listening experience from your records and your turntable without changing the records or the turntable. Thus began my fascination with different kinds of phono cartridge. Now, I got rid of all my records in 1993. I had to move. I didn't want to take them with me, and I gave them away, and I gave away my turntables. So for 17 years, it was nothing but digital audio for me. And then, sometime around 2008, I started to get fascinated with old analog audio again, like records and tapes, and I rediscovered that world of wonderful sound, and I have been going strong ever since. Now, the way audiophilia works is that once every 2 or 3 months or so, I spend money that I don't have, and then it throws me into a state where all I want to do is sit around and play records and play with my turntable. I don't take showers, I don't eat, I avoid any social situation that I'm not absolutely obligated to be in, and I just sort of disappear, and that's what I do. So this video comes from those experiences, and the reason why I'm doing cheap phono cartridges, that's $100 and below, that's a budget phono cartridge, just because I'm cheap. And I think it's interesting to see who gives you the best for the least. If you pony up $150, $200 for a phono cartridge, and believe me, that's still quite on the low end of the prices that you could pay, you're going to get a whole different world of sound. Usually when you get about there, you've got really good sound, but it's always fun down on the low end to see what's going on. So that's what we're going to do in this video. And like I said, most of the time I do the videos about computers these days, but once in a great while a video about audio slips in, and this is one of those. Before we get into talking about the individual cartridges, let's talk a bit about stylish shape and the construction of the cartridge and some of the key specifications. First, over here on the left-hand side of the screen, we have a picture of an actual stylus. The stylus itself is at the end of a cantilever. The cantilever is what most people call a needle, because it kind of looks like a needle. But down at the end, we have a shank, which is glued onto the stylus, and then at the end of the shank, there is the tip, which is made out of diamond, and it should be made out of diamond if you're going to be playing records. Believe it or not, there are still some sapphire styluses around. Do not ever use those to play your records if you care about your records. Always play your records with diamond. The diamond is usually just the very tip, so when you hear people talk about a bonded stylus, that's what that means. You have a shank made out of something else, then the tip is bonded to it with some sort of glue or cement. The next step up from a bonded stylus would be a nude stylus. And when people say that, that means that there is no shank, that it's just a diamond that is stuck on the end of the cantilever, and it's a much larger diamond, therefore it's more expensive, and one end of that diamond is milled to give the desired stylish shape. Over on the right-hand side of the screen, we're talking about stylish shape going from right to left. There you will see that the first one is a conical stylus, also known as a spherical, because when you look at it straight on, it looks like a circle. And this is the most basic stylus there is, and most records, even today, probably get played with conical styli. Now, the specs for the LP call for a 0.7 mil conical styli to play a stereo record. Before stereo came along in 1957, the specs were 1 mil. A mil is 1/1000th of an inch, and that is usually how styli, the radius, is measured, is in mils, but every now and again you'll see something else. The next step up from a conical stylus is an elliptical stylus, and you will see in the chart below there that you have an elliptical stylus tracking a groove. It sort of looks like an American football with the skinny ends facing the groove walls. Elliptical styli supposedly can make your audio cleaner and give it more detail. However, it has to be set up just right, because that stylus has to be aligned properly in 3 planes to the groove to work the way it's supposed to. So that's when your tone arm setup and your alignment of your cartridge becomes very important when you start moving up. Even for a conical stylus, you really need to be very careful that your alignment is right. Then we have more advanced shapes like Shibata and Microline, which is a brand that is made by Audio-Technica. You will hear of Microline styli, and there are other various shapes as well, like Vandenhull and others. And the more advanced the shape, the more expensive the stylus is. For a modern elliptical stylus, usually what you're getting is a conical, which is a 0.7, where they've kind of shaved the front and the back off a little bit to make it a 0.3 by 0.7 mil. That's pretty common these days. So there you go. There is a lot of opinion about what stylus shape sounds best, and I will withhold that opinion until the end of the video. One more thing I wanted to talk about before we got into the individual cartridges was tracking force. Tracking force is the most important specification that is listed with your cartridge, and you need to know what that is, and you need to know how to set it properly. There is a lot of myth out there about tracking force. Let me clear that up right now. The first myth that is the most dangerous is that if you track as light as possible, that it will extend the life of your records. That is absolutely positively not true. Tracking a cartridge below the recommended tracking force, let's say that the tracking force is listed as 2 grams and you're going to track it at 1 gram, is going to lead to distorted audio, and it will destroy your records, because that distortion you're hearing is the stylus losing contact with the groove wall because there's not enough pressure to keep it in contact with the groove. And every time that you hear that kind of distortion, that stylus is rattling around in that groove, and when it bangs back into the wall of the groove, it gouges it out, and that's permanent damage. So, when you are setting up your turntable, you make sure that you are running the cartridge at the proper tracking force listed by the manufacturer, or more, but not less. Also, there are those that freak out if they hear that a conical stylus will track at 3 grams. That is perfectly acceptable. A conical stylus is very kind to records, and it's one of the reasons that you might want to run one, especially if you have old precious LPs, or if you have a lot of 45s. 45s are recommended to be played with a conical stylus most of the time. And they are very, very kind to records. They put very little wear in the groove. The more advanced stylus shapes have a broader contact with the groove, and therefore have the potential to create more wear. So when you're talking about a conical stylus tracking at 3 grams, that's doing less damage than an elliptical stylus tracking at 2 grams most of the time. Just food for thought as we roll through this list of stuff. And let's take a look at the list of cartridges we're going to look at. These are actual cartridges that I have owned, played with, and listened to this year. And yeah, I don't know why the AT3600 audio equals Technica, but yeah, somebody's going to point that typo out, so I need to go ahead and just say that. Yep, that should be a little hyphen there, but it ain't. But anyway, this is the list of cartridges we'll be talking about. A lot of Audio-Technica, a Goldring, and a couple of Ortofons that I have been playing with this year. The first cartridge we're going to look at is the Audio-Technica AT95e. This is a wonderful cartridge that's been around for a long time, and I am particularly fond of this cartridge. And you can get it for somewhere around $40, depending on where you're looking, and we're talking about $40 US. This cartridge performs way above the price that you pay for it, and it is been shipped on turntables that cost a lot of money. Thorns ships with Audio-Technica cartridges. TIAC ships with the Audio-Technica 95E cartridge. Of course, Audio-Technica ships their turntables with some form of the Audio-Technica AT95E. And then if you talk about clear audio, their Virtuoso cartridges are actually AT95E guts with special styli and bodies put around them. So a universally admired cartridge for not a whole lot of money. So let's take a look at some of these specifications. Now, specifications, they don't mean a great deal when you're talking about the way a cartridge sounds, but it can give you some idea of how the cartridge is going to perform. Pretty much every company says that the cartridge does 20 to 20,000 hertz for the frequency response. They don't really tell you what the actual curve of that is. No transducer, whether it be a cartridge, microphone, speaker, whatever, is 100% flat. But that's what they say is 20 to 20,000, so that means it will pass those frequencies. Stereo separation for this particular version of the AT95E, which is the latest, says that it's greater than 20 dB at 1 kilohertz. Now we get into tracking force, 1.5 to 2.5 grams with 2 grams recommended. I have always had pretty good luck just tracking these things at 2 grams. It seems to me that if you have a nice tone arm and it's well set up, that tracking above that really doesn't help much as far as making the audio any cleaner or reducing sibilance. It kind of is the way it is. And then we have the output voltage, which is 3.5 millivolts. So this is kind of a medium output cartridge when it comes to moving magnet cartridges. Low would probably be somewhere like 2 millivolts, and of course high would be 5 and above. So this is the medium of the medium. And then the cantilever is made out of aluminum, and the stylus is a 0.3 by 0.7 mil elliptical diamond stylus. One of the nice things about the AT95E cartridge is the fact that there are lots of aftermarket styli available for it. So if you go to some place like LP Gear, you can get a conical stylus if you want. You can get their upgrade styluses for this particular cartridge. They have one that's called the Carbon Fidelity with a carbon fiber cantilever. They have a Vivid line, which is sort of like a microline, advanced stylus shape. They have a Shibata that you can put on this cartridge, and it does make a difference. They sound a little bit better depending on the grade of stylus that you put on. I have several upgrade styluses for my AT95Es. I've run this on my U-Turn Orbit turntable and my the Audio-Technica LP5 turntable came with the next cartridge that we're going to look at, which is the AT95EX. Overall sound, very nice stereo, very well presented. These cartridges have a sweet sound to them. They're not the most dynamic of cartridges out there. They don't give you a whole great deal of punch, but they are very pleasant to listen to and extremely musical, as long as you're not being too critical about things like sibilance, because these cartridges will mistrack if there's a lot of high frequency material on the record. But it does handle it quite well. It doesn't really make a big loud splat. It's just sort of a tss sound, so it's not too bad if it actually does mistrack. But it tracks well enough where I don't complain, and I'm super sensitive to sibilance. One of my favorite cartridges overall is the AT95E. And on YouTube here, if you type that in, there's a lot of comparisons with this cartridge with a lot of more expensive cartridges audio-wise, and you can go listen for yourself. It's actually interesting to hear how much better this cartridge sounds than a lot of the other ones that are more expensive. The next cartridge on the list is the AT95EX. This is an improved version of the standard AT95E that was designed specifically for the Audio-Technica LP5 turntable. I bought one of those turntables, and the AT95EX showed up as part of the turntable itself. If we go over here and look at the specifications, you will see that now we have a frequency response that goes out to 22,000. Now, what is interesting here is that the stereo separation is listed as 20 dB, not greater than But I can tell you from listening to this cartridge that the stereo separation is better than the standard AT95E with the stock Audio-Technica AT95EX stylus. It's much better. Tracking force pretty much the same. Standard is 2 grams. We have a bonded round shank, and then the output of the cartridge, once again, 3.5 millivolts. The stylus shape, 0.3 by 0.7, and it's an aluminum pipe. Supposedly, the idea behind this cartridge is that they used a little bit better materials when putting it together than the standard stock AT95Es, or it could be that they're just finding the ones that perform the best off the production line and then rebranding them with a little bit of an upgraded stylus. Not really sure what the deal is with that. I do know that this cartridge costs a little bit more than your standard AT95E, usually runs around $50, depending on where you can find it. And it's worth it. It's a nice little bit of an upgrade from the standard AT95E, and those upgrade styli that you can buy for an AT95E will fit fine on the AT95EX. Nice cartridge, and worth adding to the list here of mentions, because this is one that I have actually enjoyed quite a bit. The next cartridge on the list is the AT95E, and on my list I put E and C because I actually bought 2 styli when I bought this cartridge. I bought a conical and I bought the elliptical, and this is the new quote-unquote VM version of the 95E series of cartridges, and these were just introduced very late August, September, early September. So these have just come out, and there's not a whole lot of information out there about them. And this is the most recent one that I actually bought and played with just before I started making this video. And we'll take a look at the specifications here. They say that the frequency response is 20 to 22,000. Okay, that's great. The stereo separation is 20 dB. Once again, we have the tracking force being 1.8 to 2.2 grams, with 2 grams being standard, so not quite as wide of a range. Output has been boosted to 4 millivolts because they are using a new kind of coil with pure copper. The channel separation is the balance between the channels is within 2 dB of it being right. That's what they say. Mine was fine. It was right down the middle, and so were all my AT95Es. I never had a problem with channel balance with those. The stylus is a 0.3 by 0.7, so once again they started out with a 0.7 and shaved it down to 0.3, and then we have an aluminum pipe. And this particular cartridge comes with a wide variety of styli. It goes from conical all the way up to Shibata and into the microline styli. They have a nude elliptical, which is the next one up, and that puts the price well over $100. So right now I am finding these for about $34, and that's the AT95E, and that's like on Amazon.com. And they are not an improvement over the AT95E. These do not improve the sound. Mine came with a very limited stereo range, and it didn't matter what stylus I was using, because in the specifications, if you look it up for the VM95C, which is the one that comes with the conical stylus, they only state the separation as being 18 dB at 1 kilohertz. Well, it's very apparent when you listen to it. You have a very narrow stereo soundstage, and everything seems to be kind of smashed together. Also, the high output of the cartridge, for me, tended to make it sound overbearing. It sounded really kind of loud. There's a lot of bass and not a lot of high frequencies in this cartridge. It almost sounds like that everything sort of rolls off a little bit at the high end. So I was not particularly impressed with this. I thought that being that it was the new quote-unquote VM technology, that it would be an improvement over the 95E. It really wasn't. But it's not a terribly bad sounding cartridge. And if that's what you want, is kind of a big, brash, bold, thumpy sound, then this might be the cartridge for you. I was not. If it was the only cartridge I had and I wanted to listen to records, it wouldn't stop me from listening to records, but it just didn't have that snap, and it certainly didn't have the wide stereo presence that I'm used to from the AT95Es. So that's my opinion on this new line of cartridges. We'll see how they evolve over time, but right now I don't think it's an improvement over the old AT95E. Next on the list is the cheapest and the weirdest of the bunch. It's the Audio-Technica AT3600L Phono cartridge, and we are looking at the LP Gear webpage for that. LP Gear being an American supplier of styli and cartridges. It's one of my favorites. Needle Doctor is good as well. They do not give me anything for putting them in the video. It just happens to be that they actually have this listed for sale. The AT3600 is a weird cartridge that most of the time when you see it, it's rebadged with a different name on it. It is the most generic and the most ubiquitous cartridge in the world, and it's made by Audio-Technica. A lot of turntables have been shipped over the years with this basic cartridge design, and this cartridge design goes way, way back. It's been around for a very long time. What's very interesting is that right now you can buy, for instance, the Riga Carbon cartridge, which is essentially an Audio-Technica AT3600 with a different name on it, and they're selling it for like $60, and you can get it for $24 here at LP Gear. And if you're really slick about it, you can find them for even cheaper on eBay, kind of like bulk, I guess. Buyers get a hold of them and can sell them for very cheap. So let's kind of take a look at the specifications here. The output is 4.2 millivolts. Frequency response 20 to 20,000. Channel balance within 1.50 dB. So that's actually better than what we've seen from the AT95E and the AT-VM95C and E thus so far. We have a stereo separation at 1 kilohertz of 24 dB and 15 at 10 kilohertz, which is quite respectable. Tracking force 2.5 to 3.5 grams, and it has a 0.6 mil elliptical, or rather conical diamond, which is what is shipped standard with this. There are tons of different styli available for the AT3600, from elliptical all the way up to Shibata and all sorts of different sizes of styli. They even have them for playing 78s, like a 3 mil stylus for playing 78s and old radio transcription discs. This is a very standard universal cartridge. It's been around forever. Got a bonded round shank for the kind of cantilever construction. And not only that, the cartridge itself, you're going to find this on turntables like the Audio-Technica LP60 or the Pioneer PL990 or the Sony, all of those different turntables that come with that kind of funky Audio-Technica integrated tone arm that have the cartridge integrated into it. That's the cartridge that's integrated, and the styli are interchangeable. And this cartridge tracks nicely at about 3 grams. It is bright, light, clean. It has a very wide stereo image. It is very pleasant to listen to, and it's extremely dynamic, very punchy sound coming from the AT3600. And I have played with this cartridge several times over the years and always been impressed one way or another by the way it sounds. The first time that I bought one of these was probably about 1990. I bought a secondary turntable that had one of those integrated tone arms in it, and then I bought a PL990 a couple of years ago to play around with, and I was impressed with the sound then. And I picked up a half-inch version that I could put into a head shell, and I could run on my AT LP5 turntable and my U-turn Orbit. So I've been very impressed with this particular little cartridge. The next cartridge to talk about is the Goldring E1. This is also one of the newer models of cartridge. It's only been out for a few months or so, and I bought one to see what it was like. They're a little bit difficult to get a hold of in the United States right now. The price can range anywhere from $75 to $100 depending on where you buy it from. And it's kind of a weird cartridge. This is part of a new series from Goldring, the E series. They have the E1, the E2, and the E3. And this cartridge was the biggest disappointment of the bunch. It got packed up and sent back. I didn't do a great deal of listening to it. because I really did not like what I heard at all. So they are talking about it having a carbon cantilever. It has a spherical stylus, 0.6 mil, 20 hertz to 20,000 here. They're talking about a tracking force around 2 grams, greater than 20 dB at 1 kilohertz for stereo separation. And let's see, where is the output of this particular? Is it on here? Let's see. It's on the list somewhere, probably somewhere, and I'm missing it. Now, I don't see the output listed here. Channel balance, channel separation. Nope. It's probably right here in front of my face. Nope, they don't have it listed. Not the output of the cartridge. It sounded to me to be somewhere between 3 and 4. What I have read about these is that these cartridges are made by Audio-Technica and they are tuned by Goldring. They are built to Goldring's specification. What I heard was a very thin sounding cartridge. It didn't have a great deal of bass. There was a lot of gritty, distorted sound. And not only that, my example, the channel balance was way off. It was very much hot in the right, probably by 2.5, 3 dB, the right channel being hotter than the left. It was not a physical problem with the cantilever. That looked all right. It looked like it was something with the electrics of the cartridge or an electronic problem. And I was just really not impressed with this cartridge at all and cannot recommend it. But I add it to the list because it's one that I actually spent some time with and used. Oh, they do have the output. It's listed under sensitivity, 3.5 millivolts. So yeah, I was about right. Between 3 and 4 millivolts. Just thought I'd catch that before somebody started typing in the comments. It's right there. You missed it. I know I did. The next cartridge on our list is the Ortofon OM5e. This is a cartridge that is shipped with a lot of European turntables. Project ships them and several other companies as well. And they are not bad to listen to. This is actually a very fine phono cartridge. It has a very refined sound, a very nice high frequency. It is not the brightest cartridge I've ever heard, but it is very clean on the high end. There's very little sibilance and it tracks very well. Mid-range is very nice. The only problem that I have with the cartridge is that it, to me, has a very boomy and flabby bass. And it really just does not have the control to have a good tight sounding bass at all. But it's still a very nice cartridge to listen to. And if you don't care about that sort of thing and you're not going to be noticing that, it might actually sound good to you. You might like it. To me, that bass was just boomy, a little bit too much, but it tracks pretty much everything I threw at it, and it sounded pretty good. Specifications-wise, it's not too far off from most everything on the list here. We have an output of 4 millivolts on this particular cartridge. Stereo separation is 22 dB. 15 dB at way up at 10 kilohertz there. And it is a nice, tight, clean stereo image that you get with this cartridge. Very accurate, and there's very little interplay. It sounds like there's very low resonance within the cartridge body itself. You don't need any funky extras in there or anything like that. And then as far as the stylus shape is concerned, I make that out to be a 0.3 by a 0.6 elliptical. And the frequency response, once again, listed as 20 to 20,000. Of course, being that it's Ortofon, they give you a little bit more precise things there. The tracking force is 1.75 grams for this particular cartridge, so it tracks very well at that tracking force. That's no problem, but it's within the range. If you want to track it up to 2, that's perfectly all right. I wouldn't go lower than that, as I mentioned earlier in the video. And electrically, it seems to work well with a lot of different preamps. I have not really gone into the equipment that I use, but the stereo receiver that I'm using right now is a Scott RS30 with a very nice phono preamp, and it's very easy to... it works well with a lot of different cartridges. It seems to be very happy with different capacitances and different impedances going into the amp. I've also used this cartridge with the built-in preamp that was in my A&R Cambridge amplifier, and I had a realistic receiver that I used as well. Pretty much got the same results out of all of them, so I don't think that the preamplifiers make that huge of a difference. The electrical differences in a cartridge can change how it sounds. But this is a really good sounding cartridge, and they cost about $70 here in the US, and they're easy to set up, and they're easy to affix to pretty much any tone arm. I would say that these worked best with lower mass tone arms though. So I don't know whether this would be the best choice for a record player that had a high mass arm on it, but still a very nice cartridge. The last cartridge we're going to talk about is the Ortofon 2M Red. This is a cartridge that I did a video about 4 or 5 years ago, and I recommended that this would be the Phono cartridge to get. These things were really hot about 4 or 5 years ago, and it is a damn fine sounding cartridge. You can get them for right around $100 here in the United States. They work well with a wide range of tone arms, and if they're set up properly, they can sound really, really good. And the specifications, they're quite a bit different from the OM5e. And by the way, about the OM5e, I forgot to mention, there is a bit of confusion about the OM5e about whether you can upgrade those styli or not and go to like an Ortofon 10 or an Ortofon 20 and up the chain. The OM5e supposedly is electrically different from the Ortofon OM10. I haven't been able to nail that down 100% whether it's true or not. I don't know anybody out there who's got an OM5e that they put a 20 stylus on, but I'm not a big I'm not really into the whole OM line of cartridges, nor am I big into this line of cartridges, which is the 2M from Ortofon. Now, the 2M line starts out with the lowly red. The blue has a nude elliptical stylus, and that pretty much doubles the price. And as you move up, the stylus shapes get more precise, and the prices get way, way higher. And the one that I have played around with is the red. It's a high output cartridge. 5.5 millivolts on the output. The stereo separation is listed pretty much as the same as the OM line of cartridges, and you can take a look at the rest. It's a 0.3 by 0.7 the mil cantilever, although Ortofon uses a different way of measuring that. It's a rather heavy cartridge at 7.2 grams, so it works better on turntables that have higher mass tone arms. It goes along really well with like Pioneer Techniques type turntables that have the big aluminum tube with the head shells and all that kind of stuff. Nice sounding cartridge. I probably, of all of the cartridges besides the AT95Es, I've put the most listening into this. However, the downside of this cartridge, it's a big, boomy, bassy, loud cartridge. It's got very nice high end, but not very high end, if you know what I mean. It doesn't have that nice sheen on top of it that you'd be looking for. Also, I've noticed with the Ortofon 2M cartridges, not just mine, but I have a friend of mine who has an Ortofon 2M Blue, that they have this kind of funky distortion. They almost sound like they're not tracking the groove 100%, even though they appear to be doing that. They get this kind of hashy kind of sound that's surrounds the audio, and it just, I can hear it. I can actually spot these cartridges when I hear them without even looking at them because of that particular sound that they have. So this cartridge for me has sort of fell out of favor. But there are a lot of turntable manufacturers, the nicer turntables from Project, like the Carbons, and also VPI in the United States. They ship with these cartridges on their turntables ready to go, and it's a good basic all-around cartridge. It's not, like I said, the most precise or the cleanest cartridge, but it's a pleasant musical sound. It's the best way that I can put it. And if it was the only cartridge that I had and I had to use it to listen to my records, I really wouldn't be complaining. But I've since moved on to different things and found out that I like different sounds. I wanted to make sure that I put this in this video because I have tested this cartridge on every turntable that I've had for the last 4 years that would take a 1/2-inch cartridge. And The other thing about it is that I don't like, and this could be just my particular version, is that I get a lot of distortion, especially toward the center of the record. So I'm getting inner groove distortion, even though I know the cartridge is aligned and set up properly. That could be a stylus issue, and I might just need to replace my stylus, but it keeps me from using the cartridge on a regular basis. So that's the Ortofon 2M Red. I had recommended this as the cartridge to get in a video 4 years ago, which is still getting views and still being recommended on YouTube. These days, I'm not too sure whether I would say that or not. And that's what I got to say. So those are all the cartridges that I have played with this year and my thoughts on them. So there you have my thoughts on all of the cartridges that I have played with this year, what they sound like, what they have done for me. Probably the ones that I have run the most are the AT95E and the AT95EX. However, I did get one cartridge which has kind of risen to the top as the one that I want to spend more time listening to in 2019, and you're not going to believe which one it is. Do keep in mind that none of this is scientific. This is just my opinion. This is just me playing around with these cartridges on a U-turn orbit and an AT LP5 turntable into all kinds of old preamps that were built into my receivers, and there has been no scientific comparison. I have made no bench specification measurements using any kind of measuring device whatsoever, only my ears, and I have set it up with a very rudimentary scale that I am using to set the tracking force, and pretty much setting everything else up on the arms by eye. Keep that in mind as I present to you the winner of the 2018 budget cartridge shootout. It is the Audio-Technica AT3600L. This cartridge tracks at 3 grams, has a 0.6 mil conical stylus, a carbon fiber cantilever, and is available from LP Gear right now for $24. And if you get lucky on eBay, you can find it for $11. This is the same cartridge that comes with the relatively cheap plastic turntables from Audio-Technica and Sony and Pioneer that built into that little Audio-Technica tone arm that you see there on the left hand of your screen. You can also buy it in a head shell, ready to rock and roll right now on Amazon for a grand total of $24 from a company called Gemini, which makes cheap DJ-style turntables. They sell this particular cartridge already in the head shell, wired up. The only thing that I would warn you about is that the head shell is wired up backwards, so that the right channel is the left channel and the left channel is the right channel. This cartridge is the most ubiquitous cartridge in the world. Audio-Technica makes more of these than any other and distributes them in all kinds of different ways to different companies. They are rebranded. As I mentioned earlier, right now the Riga company, which is well regarded for their turntables, is selling a cartridge called the Carbon, which is basically this cartridge. LP Gear sells their own version of this called the Carbon Fidelity 3600. There are just a ton of these out there. And there's a lot of different styli that's available for them. So what is it about the sound of this cartridge that has got me going? And you're probably sitting there scratching your head going, dude, I can't believe this. I couldn't believe it either. First of all, the cartridge is bright sounding. It is light sounding. It does not have any grunge in the lower mid-range or bass. The bass is very clean, extremely tight, and very dynamic. The mid-range is clean and clear, and the high end on this particular cartridge, the actual treble itself, is just crystal clear. It may be just a little bit forward in the treble, like a little bright sounding, but I actually kind of like that because it reminds me of the old Stanton cartridges that I played with in radio stations back in the 80s and early 90s. Those cartridges had that little bit of extra high end, and I always loved that, just that little punch to them. And the wonderful thing about using this cartridge is if I break it, if I drop the tone arm and break the stylus off, I could care less. A replacement stylus for this is somewhere around $20 or maybe even less, and you can just pop another one on. I like conical stylus shapes. I think it's the best bang for the buck in sound. If you go to the low-grade ellipticals, the 0.4 and 0.3 by 0.7s, then you're dealing with a lot of manufacturing issues and having to have that set up just right to get decent sound out of it. And on certain records with certain kinds of wear, it can actually make the record sound worse. Whereas the conical stylus, even though it is said that you get less detail from a conical than you do an elliptical, I tend to hear more smooth sounding high-end detail from this AT3600 than I'm getting from any of the cartridges that I have with the elliptical styli, which is one of the reasons I like a 0.6mm stylus. Also, years ago I read that this was the kind of cartridge that the people who manufactured the cutting lathes that the records are actually cut with are going for. This is what they consider to be standard playback. And I went searching for that information and I could not find it. I would have loved to have included in this video, but somewhere along the way I'd actually run into the manual for a Neumann recording lathe, and it mentioned this as being the kind of standard that everybody was shooting for. So yes, for playing back your vintage 45s, your polystyrene 45s, your vintage LPs, your original mono LPs, and yes, even your modern LPs that are high modulation, this might be the cartridge to beat them all, price-wise. It only costs $24 right now. You can get it for less. You can get it on Amazon for $24 on a head shell, and you can get it at LP Gear for just $24. And there you go. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. My cartridge shootout for 2018. I will be listening to this cartridge throughout 2019 and enjoying it and saving up my money because I have decided that I am no longer going to buy the low-end cartridges. I've kind of explored that, and now what I'm going to do is save up my money, and then somewhere here, several months down the road, when I've got enough change snuck by that nobody notices that it's missing, I'm going to buy me something a little bit more, maybe up around $200, which is a lot of money for me because I'm cheap. So thank you for watching the video. As you can imagine, I would appreciate it if you would share this video and get it out there, because I don't post a lot of videos about audio on this channel anymore, and to make up the cost for all of the cartridges that I bought and all the styli that I bought for those cartridges, especially the AT-95E, since I have like 4 or 5 different styli for those cartridges, it would be nice, and that way I could make it up with a little ad revenue on the video if you would share it. So thank you once again. Don't know when I'm going to be doing a video about audio again. Could be a little while, but it's always fun when I do, and I always love to hear your feedback. So thank you for watching. The winner, 2018 budget cartridge shootout, the Audio-Technica AT3600L.